In the early morning of March 17, 2019, around 2:47 a.m., I walked barefoot towards the Arabian Sea, determined never to return. The dark waves seemed to call to me, as if offering me peace in a final embrace. I was 28 years old, possessing riches most people would never see in their lives. 3 palaces, cars, travels. But inside, I was a bottomless pit. My name is Faisal bin Rahman, and that night, I believed I was living my last moments. But God had other plans for me. I grew up in Riyadh, surrounded by luxury, but none of it seemed beautiful on the inside. My earliest memory isn't of a happy childhood. It's of my father beating an employee because the tea had gotten cold. I was 4 years old. My mother tried to protect me by covering my eyes, but the sound of the blows remained forever etched in some corner of my heart. That was the true face of my life. Wealth on the outside, cruelty on the inside. Stiff smiles, marble floors, and fear everywhere. When I was 7 years old, I met Jusf, the gardener who tended the rose bushes. He was different from all the other employees. While most walked hunched over, their gaze fixed on the ground, he whistled soft melodies and always greeted me with a calm smile. One day, I found him hiding behind a fountain, crying while holding a small wooden cross. I asked him why he was crying, and he answered me with a serenity I didn't understand. "My little prince, I am crying with gratitude. Jesus loves me, even here, so far from my home." I had no idea what that meant, but those words planted something inside me, something small, but alive. 3 weeks later, Joseph disappeared. I heard rumors that he had been deported because of his faith. I never saw him again, but his smile and that strange peace remained etched in my memory. Time passed, and I became everything they expected: quick, cold, efficient. At 13, I was sent to a military academy in the middle of the desert, where the children of the elite learned to be strong. There, the little innocence I had left evaporated. I saw brutal punishments for minor mistakes. I saw executions celebrated as if they were trophies. I learned that there, cruelty was synonymous with honor. I spent my adolescence trying to be what everyone demanded: the perfect warrior, the flawless heir, the ruthless man. But every night I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize who was there. My body still breathed, but my eyes had given up long before. At 19, I lost the only person who truly understood me: Layla, my distant cousin and childhood friend. She was the only one I could talk to about my anxieties, and together we nurtured a secret dream of escaping that suffocating world. But Layla was forced to marry a man old enough to be her father. 2 months later, I received the news of her death. They said it was a domestic accident, but my family's silence said otherwise. It destroyed me. I tried to fill the void of loss with everything money could buy: parties in Dubai, trips, yachts, drinks, endless distractions. Nothing filled the emptiness. It only grew. I attended important meetings with a rehearsed smile while, inside, I planned my end. When I turned 25, I was given in marriage, literally given, to the daughter of another prince, as a political arrangement. There was no love, nor was there any expectation of any. It was just another charade, and on a stormy desert night, during a royal hunt, I simply wandered off. I walked until I was lost among the dunes, wishing the wind would erase my tracks and the sand would swallow me whole. As I walked alone through the dunes, an old Bedouin appeared out of nowhere, his deep eyes seeming to see right through me. "Prince of the land, but a beggar at heart," he said, his voice choked with time. "The one you seek is not in the deserts. He is where the water meets the sky, and when you find him, not even golden chains can bind him." Before I could react, he vanished into the shadows, as if he had never been there. My guards found me an hour later, trembling, confused, and speechless. I never told them about the man. Perhaps he never existed, but those words remained etched in my mind like glowing embers. The 3 years that followed were a whirlwind of emptiness and silent fury. Endless meetings, agreements that moved nations, trips through European capitals where luxury was obscene and boredom deadly. My father called constantly demanding results, heirs, perfection. My wife and I were 2 strangers sharing a palace, separated by walls of gold and silence. I tried to escape the pain with medication, to sleep, to wake up, to feel nothing. Swiss doctors prescribed more pills and called me stressed, charging fortunes for empty diagnoses. I wasn't stressed. I was completely, utterly empty. In February 2019, a family gathering in Riyadh turned into a silent trial. My younger brother Khalid, ever envious, accused me of weakness and negligence. My father coldly nodded. Faisal has softened. He is not worthy of the crown he wears. In that instant, I knew my life as I knew it was over. He was still breathing, but inside he was already destroyed. In the following weeks, I organized my life with a terrifying calm. I wrote letters that no one would read, revised wills that no one would know about, and every night I stood on my bedroom balcony looking west, where the sea stretched to infinity. On March 17th, I made my final decision. Later, during another meeting, more accusations and contempt. My father looked at me and said, "Sometimes I think it would have been better if you hadn't been born." His words didn't hurt. There was nothing left to hurt. That night, I waited until the palace fell asleep. I took off my silk clothes and gold rings, putting on something simple, almost like a maid. I took the keys to an unassuming car and drove towards Jeddah, towards the sea, towards the end. 5 hours on a deserted road under a starless sky. No music, no phone calls, just the sound of the engine and the fragmented thoughts of someone who no longer expected anything. Each kilometer was a countdown to oblivion. I arrived at the coast at 2:15 a.m. I parked away from the tourist areas, on a beach I'd cherished since childhood. My mother used to bring me there to watch the sunrise, before she became part of the world that had destroyed me. "The sea is eternal, Faisal," she would say. "We are just visitors." That night, I planned to be more than a visitor. I planned to disappear. I walked along the sand, still warm from the previous day's sun, each step closer to what I believed to be the end. The Arabian Sea stretched out before me like a black, hungry mouth. The waves broke with a hypnotic rhythm, almost like a lullaby, calm, perfect, definitive. Before diving in, I took the letter I had written that afternoon from my pocket, my last letter. It had no recipient, because there was no one I truly trusted. I left it under a rock, knowing the wind might carry it away. It was symbolic. My entire life had been carried away by winds I could never control. I took off my shirt and pants, remaining only in my underwear before that vast expanse of water. Touching the shore, I felt the surprisingly warm water. I took one step, then another. It rose to my knees, then to my waist. I walked without haste. For the first time in years, there was no hurry at all. When the water reached my chest, I stopped. I looked back at the beach, at the distant lights of Jeddah, at everything I was leaving behind. I felt no sadness, nor relief. Just nothing. A complete and utter numbness. And that was exactly what I was seeking. "Forgive me, Mother," I murmured to the wind. I didn't believe she would hear me, but I needed to say something, anything, before I disappeared. So I plunged in. The water swallowed me, and everything became a dull, distorted world. I opened my eyes beneath the salt water. It burned, but I didn't care. I exhaled. My lungs filled with bubbles rising toward the surface I no longer wanted to reach. My body instinctively tried to fight, to swim upward, to survive, but my shattered mind commanded me to remain still. I sank deeper and deeper. The bottom wasn't very deep, maybe 6 or 7 meters, but deep enough to make my lungs burn, to fill my vision with black spots, to make everything begin to disappear. Then it happened. I felt a hand. But it wasn't like human touch that registers pressure or heat. It was different. This hand gripped my right arm with supernatural force, piercing my skin, muscles, and bones, reaching something much deeper, my soul. My eyes opened underwater and there was no one there. No boat, no diver, no logical explanation. The hand remained firm, pulling me upwards with absolute determination, as if to say, "No, not yet. Not like this." I tried to resist, but it was impossible. It was like fighting against a current carrying 1,000 tons. It lifted me, forced me to rise, despite my desire to remain at the bottom. In the midst of that struggle, I saw something that changed everything. A figure of light. It wasn't a reflection of the moon, nor a hallucination caused by lack of oxygen. It was real, tangible, impossible to explain, present underwater with me. It had no defined face, but it had a human form, a presence that radiated peace and power at the same time. And in that instant, I felt something I had never felt before, unconditional love, an acceptance that needed no words. There, beneath the Arabian Sea, I realized that my life was not yet over. Someone, God himself, was holding me, telling me that my story was not yet finished, and the figure emanated a light that came not from any external source, but from itself, a white and golden light that transformed the darkness of the sea into something crystalline and beautiful. There were no audible words, but a clear, firm, and unmistakable voice echoed in my mind, in perfect Arabic, the language of my childhood. "Not yet, Faisal. Your life doesn't belong to you to end. I have plans for you. Plans of hope, not despair. Plans for life, not for an end." Suddenly, the hand that held me pulled me forcefully to the surface, as if an explosion had thrown me out of the water. I broke through the sea coughing, swallowing salt water, my lungs burning, but every pain was glorious because it meant I was still alive. I swam to the sand with an energy I didn't know I possessed, my heart pounding as if it were about to explode, my arms thrashing uncontrollably. When I finally reached the shore, I collapsed face down, vomiting seawater and sobbing uncontrollably. "Why?" I screamed at the sky. "Why didn't you let me go?" There was no audible response, but I felt something I had never felt in my 28 years. An inexplicable, irrational peace beyond any logic. A peace that transcended the fear, the despair, the emptiness that had consumed me since childhood. I lay on the sand until the sky began to change, from black to deep gray, and the first signs of dawn appeared. I trembled, not just from the cold, but from something much deeper. My mind struggled to process the impossible. The hand, the figure of light, the voice. None of it could possibly exist, and yet it was more real than any luxury, any lie my life had offered me. As the sun began to rise on the horizon, I heard footsteps on the sand. I raised my head, still weak, and saw an older man approaching. He was wearing simple fisherman's clothes and carrying a net over his shoulder. His eyes, seeing me lying there, almost naked and injured, filled with concern. "My son, what happened to you?" he asked, in Arabic, with a slight Egyptian accent. He knelt beside me, setting the net down on the sand. I couldn't speak. I just stared at him as if I'd completely lost my sanity. But he understood. He took off his old coat and covered me, sitting down beside me in silence, gazing at the horizon. Dawn arrived slowly, but at that moment, it felt like we had all the time in the world. After a few minutes that seemed like hours, I finally found my voice. I told him what had happened underwater, about the invisible hand, the light, the voice. The fisherman didn't laugh. He showed no surprise. He just nodded slowly, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Jesus has this habit," he said calmly. "He appears when we need him most, especially when we have lost all hope." That word, Jesus, resonated in my heart with the same reverence that Joseph, my childhood gardener, always had. The same word that my family had taught me to hate, despise, and fear. But there on that beach, I realized for the first time that there was no reason for fear. Only love, acceptance, and a new beginning. The same word, Jesus, at that moment, on that beach, while the sky was tinged with orange and pink, sounded like the answer to a question I had carried my whole life, without even knowing what it was. "How do you know?" I asked the fisherman, my voice almost a broken whisper. He smiled, and in that smile I saw the same inexplicable peace I had felt on the sand. "Because he also saved me once, son. Not at sea, but in a prison cell in Cairo. He saved me when I also wanted to disappear. Since then, my life no longer belongs to me. It belongs to him. And believe me, it's better that way." We stayed on that beach until the sun was fully visible on the horizon. The fisherman, whose name I never learned, shared bread and water with me from his small bag. He spoke of a man named Jesus, who walked on water, calmed storms, and resurrected the lost. He spoke as one shares news from a close friend, not as one reciting ancient religious stories. When I finally stood up to leave, still trembling but somehow stronger, the fisherman held my hands. "Go home, Prince," he said, and somehow he knew who I was. "But remember, you are no longer the same person who went into the water. There you died, and he resurrected you. Now you need to discover who you have become." I left the beach like a man in a dream. The world seemed different, the colors more vivid, the sounds clearer. Even the air tasted different. I drove back to Riyadh in silence, but it was no longer the silence of emptiness. It was a silence filled with something new, something that felt like the beginning of everything, just when I thought I had reached the end. That night in my palace room, I knelt for the first time in my life, not in ritual, but in true supplication. I don't know who you are, I whispered to the darkness. I don't know. What do you want from me? But if you saved me for some reason, show me. I can't continue living in this cage, not after feeling your hand underwater. I wasn't expecting an answer, and yet, when I closed my eyes, I slept without medication for the first time in years. I dreamed of light. The following days were strange and wonderful at the same time. Outwardly, everything continued as before. I attended meetings, signed documents, smiled when asked. But inside, something had changed radically. I felt like a spy in my own life. Conversations about power and money sounded empty. Ostentatious displays of wealth seemed obscene. And every night, alone, my mind returned to that hand underwater, to the voice that told me there were plans for me. I began researching in secret. The internet became my clandestine university, using private connections to keep my identity protected. I read about Jesus, about Christianity, about people who had lived through experiences similar to mine. Each story resonated with me in a way that no previous religious teaching ever could. It wasn't about empty rules or soulless rituals. It was about relationship. It was about love. It was grace that didn't need to be earned, but that existed, firm and unconditional for me. 3 weeks after that encounter at sea, I had my second supernatural experience. This time, in a dream, but so vivid, so real, that it made waking life seem pale. I saw a man walking toward me through a burning desert. The fire opened before him as if ashamed to touch it. When he stopped in front of me, I could see his face. His eyes held such deep, overwhelming compassion that my legs gave way, and I fell to my knees. Faisal, he said my name with a tenderness I had never heard before. It was as if he were singing. I've waited your whole life for this moment. All the pain you've lived through, all the darkness you've been through, it's all brought you here. You are no longer alone. With me, you will never be alone again. He held out his hand. In his palm was a scar, an old one, but still vivid. These are for you, he said, to open your cage, to break your chains, to give you life, life in abundance. I woke up crying, but they weren't tears of despair. They were tears that tore through years of accumulated pain, washing away poison I'd carried since childhood. And in that crying, something inside me finally gave way. The walls I had built around my heart simply crumbled. For the first time, I felt something I could only describe as love. Not human love, but something eternal. Something that called me by name. I knew what I needed to do, and I knew the price. In Saudi Arabia, abandoning Islam to follow Christ is not just a personal choice. It is seen as betrayal, family shame, and often a silent sentence. But after being snatched from the depths of the sea, after that hand that was not of this world, the fear of the consequences seemed small compared to the fear of rejecting the one who had clearly found me. I then began a careful search. I wanted to know if there were others like me. I discovered that there was a small clandestine network of Christians, foreign workers, discreet diplomats, and converted Saudis living double lives, risking everything. I spent weeks exchanging encrypted messages, arranging meetings in unlikely places, until finally someone agreed to meet me. His name was Marcus, a British engineer who worked for an oil company. We met in an underground parking garage at a shopping mall in Riyadh, inside his car with tinted windows. He was about 40 years old, and his eyes showed that he carried many stories he preferred not to tell. I know who you are, he said bluntly, and I know what you're risking by seeking me out. So I'll be direct. If it's just curiosity, I can give you some books and you can go home. But if it's real, if you truly believe that Jesus met you in that sea, then know that this will change everything. Your family, your status, your safety, everything. Are you sure about what you're doing? I looked at him. I was ready to die. If I have to lose my life, that's fine. But I need to understand why I was saved. Marcus nodded, as if recognizing someone who has crossed the point of no return. So we begin today. There's a safe place, a basement in the house of a Filipino diplomat. We meet there on Friday nights when everyone is at the mosques. There are few of us, 5, maybe 6. We study the Bible, pray, and learn to follow Jesus in secret. It's risky, Marcus said, but if God is calling you, then there's no safer place than to obey. Those words marked the night that would transform my life forever. The basement where we met was small, simple, with worn carpets covering the floor and a single lamp casting a soft, almost intimate light. There were 4 people there besides me, 2 Filipinos, an Ethiopian woman and, to my astonishment, a young Saudi man of about my age. When our eyes met, there was a silent recognition. We both knew how much it cost to be there. We were crossing an invisible border, from which one does not return unscathed. Marcus opened a used Bible, its leather worn by the hands that had held it. "Today we're going to talk about a man named Nicodemus," he began, "a respected, powerful leader who sought Jesus in secret at night because he feared what others would say." Sounds familiar, doesn't it? For the next 2 hours we read and talked, but it didn't feel like a formal study. It wasn't theoretical. Every word seemed alive, as if it had been written just for me. When we got to the words, "It is necessary to be born again," I felt something inside me tremble. "Born again," I repeated, almost without realizing it. Is that what happened to me at sea? I died and came back different. The young Saudi man, Ahmed, spoke for the first time. His voice was firm, but his eyes held a profound story. "Brother, we all need to allow something inside us to die so that we can finally live. I lost my family 2 years ago when they discovered my faith. But even so, I gained something infinitely greater. I gained life, real life." Tears began to fall before I could even hold them back. Marcus placed his hand on my shoulder and said gently, "Here you can cry, Faisal. Here you are free. Here you don't have to be the prince. Here you can just be you." For the next 3 months, that basement became the only place where I truly breathed. Every Friday, I would invent some urgent appointment, overdue meetings, property inspections, whatever, and leave the palace to join that small, hidden group. And there, in that humble space, I found more peace than in my entire life surrounded by gold. I learned about grace, about forgiveness, about a God who doesn't demand perfection, but offers love. Each teaching dismantled, brick by brick, the walls I had built around my heart. Marcus gave me a Bible to call my own, hidden inside the cover of a finance book. I read it under the covers, with a flashlight, like a child protecting a forbidden treasure. And the dreams didn't stop. Almost every night Jesus appeared. Sometimes he spoke to me. Other times, he simply remained present, silent and welcoming, where before there had only been nightmares. One night I dreamed that he was washing my feet, and I woke up crying, because I understood what that meant. The King of the universe kneeling before me, when all my life I had been served by people who feared me. In August, 4 months after the sea, I knew the time had come. I gathered the group, and with a racing but firm heart, I declared, "I want to give my life completely to him. I want to be baptized. I want to follow him, come what may." Marcus and the others exchanged serious glances. He took a deep breath. "Do you understand that after this step, there is no turning back? Not only before God, but before your family, your country, the consequences." I interrupted him before he finished. The time for half-hearted decisions was over. "I already know the price," I replied, "and I accept it." When I finished speaking, Marcus simply nodded, like someone who already knew the answer before hearing it. "You were called from the depths of the sea, Faisal. That hand didn't pull you out by chance." And I knew it was true. With every dream, every encounter, every step since that night in the Arabian Sea, everything pointed in the same direction. I belonged to him. A week later, in a discreet house on the outskirts of Riyadh, they prepared everything. The place was simple, quiet, and sheltered. The bathtub was filled with water that everyone had prayed over, as if each drop carried hope. Marcus placed his hands on my shoulders and said with gentle firmness, "In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, I baptize you, Faisal, buried with Christ in his death, resurrected to walk in newness of life." When I emerged from the water, something exploded inside me, but not pain, not fear. It was joy, a joy so profound it seemed to move every part of my body. I laughed and cried at the same time, uncontrollably, while the others embraced me like brothers celebrating the return of someone who was lost. In that moment, I knew this was the life I had always sought, even when I didn't know its name. And if someone reading or listening to this feels that same prompting, that same restlessness that God is calling them, don't ignore it. Share this story. Someone, somewhere, needs to remember that no matter how low they have fallen, His hand reaches where no human being can. But the joy of Christ, when genuine, will always be tested, and mine would be tested sooner than I imagined. Growing up in a family like mine, where every move was watched and every secret had an expiration date, made it nearly impossible to hide anything. Khalid, my brother, always on the lookout, always looking for a way to belittle me, was just waiting for an opening. And it came. On November 14th, 2019, my little secret world crumbled. I had become careless, perhaps even too naive about the peace I was experiencing. I left my Bible in a false drawer of my desk, thinking that was enough. It wasn't. While I was in a meeting, Khalid came into my room, officially looking for documents, actually sniffing around as usual. He found everything: the Bible, my notebook with notes and verses, the wooden crucifix that Marcus had given me. When I returned, I was immediately summoned to my father's private office. Upon entering, I felt the heavy air. Khalid was there, smiling with that arrogance that had always haunted me. Two uncles, known for their rigidity and fanaticism, were beside him. My Bible was on the table, open as if it were a weapon. My father spoke with such controlled calm that it sent shivers down my spine. "Explain. What is this?" I could have invented any story: academic research, cultural interest, curiosity. But something inside me refused. After all that God had done, after all that He had shown me, I couldn't lie even if I wanted to. "It's the Bible," I replied firmly, even though my heart was racing. "I've been reading it. I've been studying it. And I've found more truth here than I've found in my whole life." The silence that followed was deadly. My father stood motionless, while my uncles exchanged incredulous glances. Khalid seemed to savor every second. "Are you confessing to apostasy? In front of witnesses?" my father asked, his voice trembling with contained anger. I thought about the water closing in over my head, the hand that pulled me back when I had already given up, in the voice that said it had plans for me, in dreams where Jesus washed my feet. And for the first time in my entire life, I felt no fear, only truth. When I finished speaking, I realized something new was growing inside me, a courage I had never had before. It was strange. I was standing before the most feared man in my life, knowing that my words could seal my fate, and yet my voice came out firm. I confessed everything. I said that I had found the one who had always sought me, that Jesus reached me when I tried to end my life, that He was the one who lifted me from the waters when I had no strength left. I said that now my life belonged to Him, whatever the cost. The impact of my words was immediate. My father stood up so abruptly that the chair tipped over behind him. His face flushed with hatred, but it was a hatred born of wounded pride, not love. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" he shouted. "The shame you've brought upon this family? The danger you've put us in? Good. Don't call me father." His voice cut through the air like a blade. "A father doesn't raise a traitor. A father doesn't have a son who spits on his own lineage. A father doesn't have sons like you." A few months earlier, this would have destroyed me. I would have begged, explained myself, diminished myself. But there, facing the man whose approval I had always sought without ever achieving, that old fear simply no longer existed. The same peace that enveloped me on the beach, the same presence I felt in the basement, was there with me, firm, silent, sustaining me from within. I was losing my earthly family, but I had been welcomed into a heavenly family, and at that moment, that was enough. "Get out of my way," he ordered. "Call the guards. Faisal will be taken to the desert house. He will need time to reflect on his choices." That house in the desert was a polite name for what we all knew it to be: a private prison, a place where the family hid problems, covered up scandals, molded rebels until they broke. I grew up hearing stories of cousins who came back from there different, silent, obedient, subdued. Two enormous guards entered without saying a word and grabbed my arms. I tried to break free, but it was useless. As they dragged me outside, I turned to my father one last time. Please, if you only knew what I've been through. If you only knew. I only know one thing, he interrupted, with a chill that froze my chest. I no longer have an eldest son. Faisal bin Rahman died today. Words struck harder than any physical blow. Khalid walked me to the car, savoring every second. Before the door closed, he leaned in and whispered with that venomous smile I've always hated. I always knew you were weak, brother, but I never thought you were stupid. You'll regret not staying down there at the bottom of that sea. The door slammed shut, and the world went dark. The journey to the desert compound seemed endless. There were no windows, only the swaying of the vehicle and the sound of the engine echoing in the void. When they finally stopped, the bright sunlight blinded me for a moment. As my eyes adjusted, I saw the place. High walls, barbed wire, armed guards. It wasn't a place for reflection. It was a prison, and of the worst kind. They took me to a small room. It wasn't filthy, but it didn't offer much comfort either. A hard bed, a toilet, white walls, and a narrow window with bars, from which I could only see the vastness of the desert. For hours, then days, no one spoke to me. Food was left through a small opening in the door. I knocked, called, asked. Nothing, just silence. On the third day, the correction began. They brought in a sheikh, accompanied by a religious advisor. They sat before me with expressions that mixed authority and pity. For hours, they poured out speeches, veiled threats, doctrines, attempts to convince me that I was lost, that I had abandoned the truth, that God would reject me if I persisted on that path. But the more they talked, the more certain I became. I answered calmly, not with rehearsed arguments, but with what I had seen, heard, felt, with the truth that now pulsed within me. Jesus was not theory, nor ideology. He had found me at the bottom of the sea. He had lifted me up with his own hands. They could question my sanity, but they could not take away what I had lived. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of absolutely anything. I repeated the same truth to them, even as my body trembled. I had seen Jesus, not in some distant story, not in the words of an ancient book, but with my own eyes, there, underwater, as I begged for it to end. It was he who held me, who pulled me up, who saved me. How could I deny what I felt in my skin and soul? How could I pretend it didn't happen? The sheikh lost his patience. He said I was mistaken, that it was the work of demons, that I was being deceived by evil forces. But his words no longer held weight. I had already felt the difference between darkness and light. If that which saved me took death from my lips, gave me peace instead of torment, and filled me with love where before there was only hatred, then it couldn't have come from evil. Because what I received was life, and true life. Days turned into weeks. The correction intensified. They took away my sleep, my voice, my contact with any sign of the world. I spent hours listening to sermons that tried to convince me that I was crazy, lost, condemned. They showed me photos of my mother crying, saying that I was responsible for all of that. They threatened to erase my name from the family, to make me disappear without a trace. When the loneliness became almost unbearable, I prayed, not with memorized words, but like someone speaking to the only friend they have left. Jesus, you said you had plans. You pulled me out of the water, but now I'm trapped in a different desert, another kind of bottom. I don't know how to get out of here. Where are you? Are you listening to me? And always, somehow, peace returned, sometimes in a dream, sometimes in a silence that felt like an embrace. One night I swear I saw a glimmer in the corner of the room, faint but real, and a soft voice said, I am here. I have always been. I will never abandon you. That's what kept me alive. A month after I arrived at that isolated compound in the desert, something happened that I never expected. One of the guards, an older man who had always carried out his duties without saying a word to me, entered my room at an unusual hour, looking around as if afraid of being followed. Prince Faisal, I have little time. His voice trembled. There are people out there who know about your situation. There are people trying to get you out of here, but it has to be soon. Your family is talking about drastic measures. I was breathless for a few seconds. It was no longer a veiled threat. They were really planning to take me out. Why are you... I began. He rolled up the sleeve of his uniform. On his forearm, almost faded by the sun, was a small tattoo of a cross. "Because I also know the one who raises up those who are drowning," he said, his eyes shining. "And those who have received life cannot watch another die without trying to help." For a moment, I couldn't speak. That man, whom I had never even properly looked at, shared the same clandestine faith that sustained me. The plan was desperate and simple at the same time. During the night shift change, there would be a 15-minute gap. Salem, that was his name, had arranged everything with the network of underground Christians. A car would be waiting for me 2 kilometers away, hidden in the dunes. I just needed to cross the dark desert unseen, something that seemed impossible with armed men patrolling the area. "What if they catch you?" I asked. "What will they do?" Salem gave a sad but firm smile. His eyes held the kind of courage that only exists in those who have lost everything once. "Son, I was already dead before I met Jesus. The life I have now is not mine. It's his. If it ends up helping you live yours, then it was worth it." On the night of December 23rd, 2019, 6 weeks since they locked me in there, Salem unlocked my door. He took a deep breath, like someone who knows he may never see the sunrise again. "Now, go." And I went. "Now is the time. Go north, exactly 2 kilometers. When you reach the large rocks, the car will be hidden behind them. The keys are in the exhaust pipe. Drive to the eastern border. There are people waiting for you there. And, Faisal, may the God who drew you from the waters also guide you through this desert." I didn't have time to thank them. I just ran. I ran as if my life depended on every step, because it did. The sand sucked at my feet. The darkness hid every stone and every hole, and my heart was pounding so hard I thought the guards could hear it miles away. It was then that, behind me, I heard the inevitable. Shouts, doors slamming, alarms exploding in the silence of the night. They had noticed. "Jesus," I whispered breathlessly, fighting the pain that rose up my legs. "Lord, you pulled me out of the water. Please, pull me out of the desert too." The rocks loomed before me like giant shadows, and when I turned behind them, there it was, the car. Old, battered, but real. I searched for the keys almost blindly, and when my fingers touched the cold metal, spotlights appeared on the horizon, scanning the sand like blades of light. My hands were shaking so much I almost dropped the key. I tried to start the car. The engine coughed. I tried again. Nothing. "Please, please." On the 3rd try, the engine finally started. I accelerated without turning on the headlights, trusting only in the faint moonlight and God's mercy. Behind me, the headlights of the pursuing vehicles began to multiply, getting closer and closer. They were coming, fast. That's when the impossible happened. Out of nowhere, as if someone had given an order to heaven, a sandstorm erupted violently. In seconds, I couldn't even see the steering wheel in front of me. I stopped immediately, because moving forward would be suicide, but that meant they were blind too. It was 20 minutes. 20 minutes of a literal miracle blowing across the desert. When the storm finally subsided, I continued driving without knowing exactly where I was going, just trusting that God was guiding the way. At dawn, I crossed the border via a clandestine route that other persecuted Christians had used before. On the other side, a man stood silently. He hugged me tightly and said only, "Welcome to freedom, my brother. Your new life begins now." I can't say where I live today. Not out of fear of what they might do to me, but because I want to protect those who risked everything to take me away from my own family. What I can say is that I am finally in a place where I can breathe, where I can say Jesus without whispering, where I can open a Bible without having to hide it under another cover. And although I miss my homeland, the smells of the market, the voices in the streets, the desert sunsets, I have never experienced freedom like I do in this exile. The first few months were difficult. I cried for what I had lost, even knowing that much of it was never truly mine. I cried for the family that abandoned me, for the life I left behind, for Arabia that I may never see again. It was mourning, yes, but it was also healing. Marcus and the clandestine network took care of me. They got me new documents, a simple place where I could start over, and took me to a church for Arab refugees. It was there that for the first time, I participated in a service without fear. I sang, out loud. I raised my hands without looking over my shoulder. I listened to the word without having to hide my interest, and I cried throughout the entire service. Not sadness, but relief, gratitude, a deep conviction that God's grace has accompanied me from the bottom of the sea to freedom. My first baptism, in that hidden bathtub, had already been one of the most intense experiences of my life. But when the church learned of my escape and my newfound freedom, they wanted to mark this rebirth in a public way, without fear, without secrets. 3 months after arriving in the new country, I was led to a simple river, surrounded by men and women who, like me, had left everything behind for Jesus. When I got out of the water, the shepherd smiled and said, loud enough for the echo to fill the valley, "Today it is no longer Faisal bin Rahman who rises. Today Faisal rises free, Son of God, brother of Christ." At that moment, I felt that, for the first time in my life, my name had weight, but not the weight of tradition or lineage. It had real weight. That community embraced me like family, a family I never had. There were people from everywhere, Saudis, Iranians, Syrians, Egyptians, each carrying scars they didn't need explaining because we recognized ourselves in each other's pain. And each of us had a story of how Jesus met us in our own abysses. But I knew that God hadn't pulled me from the sea, rescued me from the desert, and brought me to freedom just so I could start from scratch, and that's it. That phrase I heard when I was drowning kept echoing inside me. I have plans for you. That's when I started an online ministry. Nothing grand, just me, my cell phone, and the truth burning in my chest. I recorded videos speaking in Arabic, sharing my journey, telling anyone on the other side of the screen, if he reached me when I was sinking in the Arabian Sea, he can reach you wherever you are. The responses came quickly. Messages from all over the region, questions, doubts, skeptical comments, but also cries from people desperate for hope. There were young people suffocated by religious systems that promised them future glory, but delivered present torment. There were women treated as property, begging for a little love and dignity. There were men crushed by impossible expectations, searching for grace like one searches for air. Until I received a message that changed everything again. It belonged to someone who only signed with the letter H. He wrote, "Faisal, I saw your testimony. I am a prince like you. I carry the same emptiness. I am thinking of following the same dark path you attempted. Is there any truth to it? Or are you just clinging to stories to survive?" I replied immediately. I couldn't ignore it. I shared not only my story, I shared my personal number. That night, he called me. We talked for 3 hours. He cried. I cried. I told him every detail, the hand that pulled me from the water, the light, the voice, the peace I had never felt before. At the end of the conversation, he prayed with me. It was simple, but sincere. "Jesus, if you are real as Faisal says, please appear to me too. I don't know where else to go." 2 weeks later, H sent me another message. Short, but powerful. "I saw him, Faisal. He came in my dream. He called me by name. He showed me his hands. Now I know. What do I do now?" H was the first of many. Princes, businessmen, military officers, people who had everything except peace. People who knew the same abyss as I did. And one by one, Jesus began to reach them. And to think that, months before, I was just a defeated man trying to die at the bottom of the sea. Today, God uses me to reach those who are exactly where I was. And it all started with a hand outstretched in the water. The work I do today is risky. I constantly receive threats. My own family has put a price on my head. Extremist organizations call me a traitor and an apostate. But each threat that arrives only confirms something within me. I am doing something important. The light that found me is illuminating places that were once dominated by darkness, and that disturbs the kingdom of darkness. 6 months ago, I received a message that shattered me, and at the same time, filled me with joy. It was from Salem, the God who helped me escape the desert. He told me that, after my escape, my family found me. They imprisoned me, tortured me for 4 months, searching for answers. But even in that hell, Jesus was with me. And now, freed by an inexplicable amnesty, I am alive, and my faith has never been stronger. Salem told me, "Your escape was not in vain. Your steps bore fruit and will continue to bear fruit." If you're hearing this, know this. It's no coincidence. God is looking for you right now. Perhaps someone in your life is exactly where I was, on the edge of the abyss, hopeless, ready to give up. And this story may be the hand He uses to rescue them. Today, I live each day as a borrowed gift. Each sunrise is a miracle, each breath a grace. I lost my biological family, my fortune, my position, and my homeland. But I gained something infinitely greater: purpose, peace, presence, and the certainty that I was never alone, not even in the depths of the sea. There are still difficult days. There are nights when the loneliness of exile weighs heavily, and news from my homeland tears me apart. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had chosen differently.
But then I remember that hand underwater, the voice that said, "Not yet," and the light that guided me. And I know that every sacrifice, every loss, every tear was worth it. Today, I help refugees who have fled religious persecution. I share my story and see the transformation in their faces when they realize they are not alone, that God has not abandoned them, and that their pain has a purpose. I also work with secret converts, teaching them about digital safety, connecting them to support networks, and giving them hope that one day they will be able to live their faith openly. I always warn them, the price is real, the persecution is real, but the reward is even more real. My mother contacted me a year ago through an intermediary. She said she missed me and that she prayed for me, even though her God is different from mine. She called me by my name as if I had vanished from her memory. Khalid, my brother, is now the heir to everything I left behind. I texted my mother, "I love you. I forgive you. I pray that one day you too will feel the hand that lifted me up, because on that day you will understand why I abandoned everything, and on that day we will be a true family." She hasn't responded yet. Maybe she never will. But I continue to pray. If Jesus could reach me, a prince drowning in emptiness and darkness, He can reach anyone. And today, as I sit before another sea, not the Arabian, but the Mediterranean, I feel His presence again. I feel the same peace that saved me at the bottom of the sea and brought me freedom. And I know with absolute certainty that He continues to guide every step of my life. The waves crash against the rocks before me, like a heart that never tires of clinging to life. The sound is the same I heard that night when I tried to disappear. But today, when I look at that sea, I don't see an end. I see the place where everything began again. I see the echo of the grace that submerged me and then pushed me back into the air. I see, reflected in the water, the memory of that hand that wouldn't let me sink, even when I begged for the opposite. I'm 31 years old now. 3 years since the day I decided to die, and 3 years since the day God decided I should live. Nothing I've achieved in these years was because I deserved it. It was a gift, a pure gift, and each sunrise reminds me of a truth I learned the hard way. God doesn't end our story at the point where we give up. If you're listening to this and feeling the same exhaustion that drove me to the bottom of the sea, if you've ever thought about giving up, if life has seemed like a precipice offering only silence, let me tell you in all sincerity, there is a hand waiting for you. There is a voice ready to say, "Not yet." There are plans you can't see now, but they are much bigger than anything you ever imagined. Your sea might not be a real sea. Perhaps it's that sadness that overwhelms you as soon as you wake up. Perhaps it's anxiety that's tightening my chest. Perhaps it's the addiction that's holding his ankles. Perhaps it's the trauma that's suffocating you, or the emptiness that nothing, absolutely nothing can fill. But I promise you, the same hand that sought me out in the depths of the Arabian Sea can find you precisely at the point of your pain. The same Jesus who entered the cold water with me can enter your dark room, your crowded bus, your suffocating silence. He is an expert at showing up where no one else can, and you don't need any title nor a dramatic story like mine. You just need to be willing to let Him lift you up. All you need to do is say, "I can't do it alone, but if you are here, help me to get up." It is in the moment you surrender that life truly begins. I discovered this in the most unexpected way, the instant I thought I had no life left to give. By the way, tell me where you're watching from. I want to know how far this story is reaching, because every word that reaches someone is a reminder that nothing I've lived through was in vain. My life should have ended in the dark water, but God transformed my planned death into a living purpose. And if you've never had an experience with Jesus,
If you've never felt that hand, but you desire it, I can guide you in a simple prayer. There's no formula, no secret ritual. It's simply opening your heart to someone who has been knocking at your door for a long time. Pray with me like this. Jesus, I'm tired. Tired of trying to fill my emptiness with things that only leave me feeling even emptier. If the Lord truly came after Faisal, come after me too. Pull me out of this deep hole I'm in. Save me from my own darkness. I surrender my life, just as it is, into your hands. Come into my heart. Be my Savior. Be my Lord. Amen. If you prayed that prayer, then let me be the first to say, you were just born again, just like me. Just like thousands who were lifted up when they no longer had the strength to swim. And from today onwards, your story will never be the same. Today, when I say welcome to the family, it's not a rehearsed phrase. It's something I say with a full heart, because I know exactly what it means to find hope when everything seems lost. So, if this testimony touched you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with 5 people. You have no idea who, in your circle, is smiling on the outside but bleeding on the inside. You don't know who is planning to give up while pretending to be okay. Sometimes, a story like this is the fine line between someone continuing to breathe or not. The sea, once my final refuge, no longer whispers of death to me. Now it reminds me of where God took me from. Each wave reminds me that I should have been swallowed by darkness, but I was returned to life. I remember that I am here, not by luck, not by my own strength, not by coincidence, but because there was a purpose awaiting me on the other side of my despair. And if you're listening to this now, perhaps you're also alive for a reason you don't yet understand. Perhaps you're breathing even without knowing why. Perhaps you're tired, weak, directionless, but you're still here. That in itself is a sign. Even when everything screams that there's no way out, there's someone more stubborn than your pain. Someone who keeps reaching out even when you've given up trying to hold it. I pray that the same God who rescued me from the depths of the Arabian Sea will rescue you from the depths where you are today. Be that depth, whether it's emotional, spiritual, or internal. I pray that the peace that cannot be put into words will fill the empty corners of your heart. I pray that you will discover, as I have discovered, that true life doesn't begin when we become strong, but when we finally stop seeking meaning in places that only hurt us. It is when we let go of control and allow the Creator to show us why we were made that everything changes. Amen.